Let's start. Today we will see how to implement the view binding in Java Android. View binding, as the name says, binds the UI components to the business logic more easily than before. Let's see the project structure. In the build.gradle file, we turn the view binding on like this. Here we have the main activity, a second activity, and a fragment. And in the UI we have the activity_main.xml file, which is the layout of the main activity. Activity_second.xml file, which is the layout of the second activity. And fragment_blank.xml file, which is the layout of the fragment. Let's see the UI. In the activity_main.xml file, we have a text view, and two buttons, click and go to fragment. Let's see the code. The constraint layout is the root layout. This is the text view. This is the click button. This is the go to fragment button. In the activity_second.xml file, we do not have any UI component, because we are going to use this activity as a container to load the fragment. That is why the ID of this constraint layout is the container. In the fragment_blank.xml file, we have a text view. Let's see the Java code now. These are the imports. This is the main activity. These are the data members. This is the view binding object of the main activity, so its class name is ActivityMainBinding. The Android system itself creates this class when we turn the view binding on in the Gradle file. This is how we set up the view binding in an activity. As you can see, we have not mentioned which UI.xml file will this activity inflate, because the view binding knows that the main activity uses the activity_main.xml file as its UI. When the click button is clicked, we set some text in the text view. Now, see carefully that we have not used the findViewById function anywhere in this tutorial. That is because the view binding automatically knows which UI component has what ID. So we can directly access the UI components by their IDs like this. This is the ID of the click button. This is the ID of the text view. This is the ID of the go to fragment button. When the go to fragment button is clicked, we navigate to the second activity where we would load the fragment. These are the imports. This is the second activity. These are the data members. As you can see, this is the view binding object of the second activity, so its class name is ActivitySecondBinding. This is how we set up the view binding in this activity. Then we call the load fragment function. This is the load fragment function, where we load the fragment inside the container of this activity. These are the imports. This is the blank fragment. These are the data members. As you can see, this is the view binding object of the blank fragment, so its class name is FragmentBlankBinding. This is how we set up the view binding inside a fragment. Then we set some text inside the text view of this fragment. This is the ID of the text view. Here also, we have not used the findViewById function anywhere in the code, and still, we can directly access this text view, thanks to the view binding. In the onDestroy function, we set the binding to null. Let's run the app. As you can see, without using the traditional findViewById function, we have managed to access all the UI components in this tutorial using the view binding functionality. So that's it. That's how you can use the view binding in Java Android. Thank you.